Allen Iverson was one of the most polarizing NBA players ever. On the court, he was a pure scorer, a killer dribbler, and a ferocious competitor. Off the court, he was a crowd magnet, a fashion icon, and a party animal. He was the best and the worst teammate at the same time, a coach's dream for one game and a nightmare the next. AI was hated by many, but is still one of the most beloved NBA players ever. He was the least efficient player who won a scoring title, and a bad defender that led the league in steals. His nickname was The Answer, but even 10 years after he retired, the question remains, was Iverson really as good as he was popular? Growing up in poverty, 5-star recruit, and a convict. Allen Iverson was born on June 7, 1975, in Hampton, Virginia. And growing up, he played both basketball and football, and he was considered a 5-star recruit in both sports. As a junior, Iverson led his Bethel High School to state titles as a point guard in basketball and a quarterback in football, and was named as Virginia Player of the Year in both sports. Iverson was destined for greatness. But then on February 14, 1993, one incident nearly terminated his career before it really began. Allen was hanging out with teammates in a bowling alley, and then a fight broke out, and because he was the most famous teenager in the state, Allen got singled out and unjustly accused of injuring a woman with a chair. The prosecution waited 8 months before he turned 18, so they could judge him as an adult. Iverson got sentenced for 5 years in prison, plus 10 years on parole. He served 4 months in a correctional facility in Newport before the governor of Virginia overturned his conviction due to insufficient evidence. Still, due to his new reputation as a convict, NCAA universities withdrew their scholarships, and his basketball career was not yet salvaged. After a hearty letter from Allen's mother, Georgetown's coach John Thompson accepted Iverson's plea, and Allen repaid him with electrifying performances on the court. AI led Georgetown to the Elite Eight and made the first team All-American as a sophomore, and he was named Big East Defensive Player of the Year in both years as a Hoya. With 22.9 points per game, he is still an all-time Georgetown leader in scoring average. Following his sophomore year, Iverson declared for the 1996 NBA Draft. He was the first player under Coach Thompson to leave Georgetown early for the NBA, where he was selected with the #1 overall pick by the Sixers. At 6'0" and 175 pounds, AI became the shortest and the lightest #1 pick ever. Rookie of the Year and rise to superstardom. In the 1980s, Magic Johnson and Isaiah Thomas set the trail for point guards to be the focal points of a championship team. Although they could score the ball, both Magic and Isaiah were old-school, pass-first point guards who have won titles as passers in teams loaded with talent. In the 90s, the game slowed down significantly and became very predictable due to the huge number of isolations for high-scoring guards and small forwards, and post-ups from bigs. There were still pass-first point guards such as John Stockton and Jason Kidd, but the new wave of point guards was emerging, with Iverson at the helm. AI played shoot-first, ask-questions-later kind of basketball that changed the point guard position forever, largely due to his influence. In a stacked draft class with Kobe, Ray Allen, Stephon Marbury, Steve Nash, and Antoine Walker, Allen dominantly won the Rookie of the Year award with 23.5 points and 7.5 assists on average. Iverson immediately became a star, and he dazzled the crowd with his fast dribble and scoring prowess. He broke Wilt Chamberlain's rookie record of 3 straight games with at least 40 points, doing so in 5 straight games, including a 50-point effort against the Cavs. The highlight of the year was his crossover on Jordan, which remains one of the best plays anybody's ever had at Mike's expense. Iverson finished with 37 that night, and with audacious plays like that, the NBA crowds were glued to their seats to see what he's going to do next. Apart from stellar play, people could see that AI was not afraid of anybody and that he carried himself with certain swag. He was the epitome of hip-hop, dressed like a rapper, and he had that battle rap attitude saying, "I'm better than you, and I'm gonna get mine, and there's nothing you can do about it." AI was generously listed at 6 feet, but was probably 5'11" and change. However, he had the mentality of Michael Jordan in the body of Trey Burke. He was small, but his persona was larger than life, and he oozed confidence with every breath he took, and everybody felt it and fell in love with it. Becoming MVP. AI had the speed that was never seen before on the NBA hardwood. Iverson's ability to slice through the basket no matter how many defenders you threw at him was unmatched, and he is without a doubt one of the best drivers in NBA history. Before he stepped on the scene, Tim Hardaway's crossover was the most famous one, but when AI showed up, everything else faded away and was not as good. He broke the ankles of half the guards in the league, and many players said they were anxious the night before they played the Sixers, simply because they knew they could get embarrassed by Iverson. AI was just that good, and in a one-on-one scenario, he was unstoppable. Quickness and skill were a nightmare for opposing guards, and nobody could deal with him off the dribble. However, his team was not equipped for playoff success, and after missing the playoffs in his first 2 seasons, Iverson and the Sixers lost in the second round to the Pacers for 2 years in a row. By the turn of the millennium, his jumpers started coming along, and AI hitting from deep unleashed a whole other set of problems for anyone trying to guard him. Philadelphia also hired Larry Brown as a head coach, who initially struggled to reach Iverson, but that would all change in the 2000-2001 season, the best year of Iverson's career. The 76ers finally assembled a squad fitted around Iverson, which wasn't the easiest thing in the world. The team featured gritty role players who would hide Allen on defense and let him shine on offense, and feed off of his relentless drives to the basket. Defensive ace Dikembe Mutombo patrolled the middle, and Eric Snow was the nominal point guard of that team and its second leading scorer. But he only averaged 12 points that year, and the nomenclature wasn't really important. Whether you call him a point guard or a shooting guard, it didn't matter. AI had the ball, and when he got it, he usually didn't give it away. AI won the 2001 MVP with an average of 31.1 points, with an insane usage rate of 38%, second highest usage ever at the time. On the way to the finals, Iverson had some of the most memorable performances against Vince Carter in the East Semis, where the two superstars traded 50-point games back and forth. The Sixers advanced in 7, after which they played 7 games against Ray Allen and the Bucks, where Iverson scored a combined 90 points in Games 6 and 7 to push Philly to their first finals since 1983. Best game of his career. The 2001 LA Lakers were one of the best teams ever assembled, with Shaquille O'Neal in his prime as the most dominant big man who ever played, and Kobe Bryant, who emerged as a superstar in his own right, surrounded by great shooters. The Sixers were the heavy underdog and were written off before the series even started, but Iverson had other plans, and he was too proud ever to admit someone was better than him. In Game 1, he tormented the Lakers' defense the entire night, with relentless drives to the basket and smooth jumpers from the baseline. AI had 30 by halftime, and the Sixers had a 15-point lead in the third quarter. Then came Tyronn Lue, a small point guard who wore cornrows like AI, and who was the only Laker fast enough to keep up with Iverson. Lue ran after Iverson like a dog, hounding him relentlessly as soon as he picked up the ball at half court, and pushing him to take tough contested jumpers. The tactic worked, and the Lakers caught up the lead and pushed the game to overtime. Iverson then decided he had enough, and he closed the game with 7 straight points, including the famous shot and step over Lue to clinch the game. He finished the game with 48 points, 6 assists, and 5 steals, and it was one of the best finals games any player has ever played in the NBA. However, Shaq and Kobe were too much, and the Lakers would go on to win the finals 4 games to 1. Despite the loss, AI was the people's champion, and at the height of his popularity. Playoff disappointments, trades, and NBA exit. After his MVP year, Iverson kept piling on points on a large volume of shots and led the league in scoring for 2 more times. However, neither was he willing to change his ways to let some of his teammates thrive, as he was always among the league leaders in usage rate. And in fairness to him, the Sixers never put as good of a team around him as they did in 2001. They won exactly 1 more playoff series with Iverson, and after a 2005 first-round exit, it was time to face the truth that the Sixers can't win the title with AI as their best player. They traded him to Denver at the midpoint of the 2005-06 season, where he joined the young and talented Nuggets, led by Carmelo Anthony. With the Nuggets, AI played some of the most efficient basketball of his career, but the team was too inexperienced to make a deep playoff run. After 2 first-round losses, Denver traded Iverson early in the 08-09 season, and it was the beginning of the end for AI. He was still good, but he lost some of the speed he had, which was a death sentence for an undersized volume shooter. After half a season in Detroit and 3 games with the Grizzlies, Allen Iverson returned to Philadelphia, where he belonged, and where fans greeted him like a deity. The answer played the last 25 games of his career for the Sixers and finished his NBA career in 2010 at the age of 34. Legacy trendsetter. Many people hated Iverson and his ball-hogging habits, his brash antics, and clothes that were fitted for someone double his size. However, for all the aspiring ball players, and especially for smaller guards, Allen Iverson was a god. For all the Davids that were trying to make it in a game of Goliaths, Iverson was the North Star. Many players modeled their game after him, and we have seen a tidal wave of shoot-first point guards flooding the league after he became popular. Iverson was only the fourth point guard to win an MVP award, and since he won it in 2001, there were 7 different years when a point guard won the MVP, which isn't a coincidence. Nowadays, the NBA is a point guard-dominated league, which was a revolution directly started by AI. Iverson was a trendsetter, and he changed the way people talked, dressed, and behaved. In the early and mid-2000s, half the NBA wore cornrows, football jerseys, and oversized t-shirts. If a kid bought an arm sleeve, he didn't buy it to protect his elbows. He bought it because Iverson made it look cool. With AI, you have to take the good with the bad. Iverson grew up poor in a bad neighborhood. He lived in an apartment where the sewer system was draining on the floor. "I'll never forget the smell of my feet. That's what pushed me to succeed," Iverson said. And just when you'd think that these conditions made Iverson get up at 5 in the morning and work on his game tirelessly, you'd be wrong. Iverson almost never woke up before noon, and he'd often go to sleep in the wake of dawn. This is arguable, but nobody in the history of basketball achieved more with less practice. Practice, yes. We are talking about practice. Iverson was pure heart and pure talent, and it was usually enough for him to be the best player on the floor. And that's why people gravitated towards him. He was just that good, and he never changed. He was the same player in person in Georgetown and on the playgrounds of Virginia, and he was the same when he got to the NBA and had the admiration of millions. And that's why you can't hate him for going out, drinking, and not dedicating his life to basketball like Kobe or LeBron. Not when he went out and played his heart out while having multiple injuries on his slender body, while still driving to the paint and attacking the basket like there's no tomorrow. From a statistical standpoint, Iverson was a bad shooter who took wild shots, passed less than he should have, and lost the ball more than he should have. But you can't look at Iverson like that, because that would be missing the point. You don't sit in a 600 horsepower Ferrari and then complain about how it's not a practical daily driver. Simply said, Iverson as a persona and a player meant too much for too many basketball fans worldwide. He was so fun to watch and so easy to cheer on, and you knew that he's giving it all out on the court. And that's why you took some of the bad with the good, and that's why people bought tickets to see him play. They didn't buy tickets to watch the Sixers, they bought them to watch Iverson. At the end of the day, it didn't matter that he didn't give it all in practice, that he hung out in clubs late, that he never lifted weights. With Iverson, it just didn't matter. That's how special he was. He was bigger than basketball, and his legacy will always be bigger than some efficiency statistic. But if we are talking statistics, let's just mention that he scored over 24,000 points, and that his point average of 26.7 is the 7th best of all time. In the playoffs, he averaged 29.7, which is second to only Michael Jordan. AI led the league in scoring 4 times, with 1 MVP, 11 All-Star appearances, and 7 All-NBA selections. He scored 40 or 50 on almost all major stars of his era. Vince, Kobe, Ray Allen, T-Mac, and Jordan, all of them were on the receiving end of his killer crossover and could do nothing to stop the little guy. Kobe said it best, "We're all lucky that Allen Iverson is not 6'5", and when Kobe says something like that, you can take it to the bank."